Hey everybody, it's Christine Garvin and welcome to Hormonally Speaking. I'm so glad that you are here with us today and I'm really excited to speak with my guest today. We had a really amazing conversation recently on her podcast, so I was super excited that she was coming over here, and her name is Nina Boyce, and she's a certified holistic health coach and hormone expert based in Columbus, Ohio. After years of struggling with chronic anxiety and hormone imbalance, she turned towards an all-natural lifestyle to heal her body. Her coaching programs focus on total hormonal wellness, mind, body, and soul, which is my jam too, incorporating both nutritional and stress reduction techniques with a blend of Reiki and tarot. Deeper healing can be achieved. She's also the host of the Healing Hormones podcast. That's what I was just talking about, that I spoke with her a couple of weeks ago. And she interviews leading women in the world of menstrual health on that podcast. And I highly recommend it because she's had some amazing guests. Like already, I'm loving it. So definitely check out her podcast. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to have a conversation part 2 with you.
I know, right?
Since we've already done this once, but on my platform. So it's fun to switch roles today.
Exactly. I'm super excited to hear, really, because I don't know your whole story and really how you got into, this hormone work with women, which I know that pretty much all of us that do this work have a personal story of like hormone hell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do know that, part of what you do is work with women around anxiety and hormones. So can you tell us your story and how those are connected?
Yeah. So I've always struggled with anxiety ever since I was little. But the thing is, when I was younger, I didn't know it was anxiety.
Right.
I just kind of thought I was different. I just kind of was revved a little higher, worried about things some other kids didn't worry about. But really, I grew up with a brother with severe special needs. And so I think that kind of set the groundwork for this underlying anxiety, because our life was always fast paced. We were always on the go. There were a lot of times that he was in the hospital when he was younger. He had seizure disorder. So I saw a lot of kind of traumatic things at a young age. And I didn't realize at the time, but my set point was just up pretty high as far as anxiety goes. So little things would stress me out more than other kids. But it wasn't until I really got to college that I started to notice it was becoming a problem, but it wasn't really the mental stuff as much as the physical. So I would notice I would get these really terrible headaches above my right eye. I always felt like it was this light sense of panic, like, ooh, I got to do this, and then I got to go there. And then, I always was doing 1,000 things all the time. I didn't really let my body shut down very often. I didn't even know how to do that.
Right.
So I graduated from college, got my full-time job. I was a middle school choir teacher. And I was teaching 550 students because I was at 2 buildings. So I was at 2 middle school buildings teaching 550 kids and a show choir and getting a master's degree and teaching private piano and voice lessons and getting married.
Talk about anxiety.
Yeah. And so,
but alone.
Exactly. But the thing is, at that time, I really, again, didn't know it was anxiety. I just thought that my body naturally, that's how I was supposed to feel. That I was just it was more like an on the go type of thing, like this underlying angst. But it wasn't until that year when I had all those things going on after 4 years of teaching that my body shut down and I had my first panic attack. And I was like, what is happening? What's going on? I woke up the next morning and I felt terrible. My stomach was upset, but then the thing is, it kept happening. I would wake up, my stomach was upset. Then I couldn't concentrate. Then I was struggling to even eat because I had lost my appetite. Then the hormonal stuff started to kick in. So I was missing my period. I was spotting inconsistently when I was getting a period. I had terrible cramps. I had cystic acne. My body was literally shutting down. And it was finally time. I was like, I'm going to go see my doctor because at this point I can't function. Mentally, I feel like I'm going to die. It honestly does feel like that. I feel terrible. So I went to my doctor and he just told me, you need to get on anxiety meds. Got my blood work. Blood work looked fine. Nothing was wrong. Of course, I was really hoping it was something like my thyroid or a nutrient deficiency, but it wasn't. And then I went to my gynecologist, and I had previously been on birth control for 7 years. I had been on and off, never really liked it. She just told me, get back on the pill. It'll help, regulate fix your periods. And so I was like, this isn't the answer. Like, I don't want to do either of these things. I know that there's something going on underneath the surface. And that's when I dove into this world of holistic health on my own, started dabbling into nutrition, really got into meditation, yoga. I started to feel better, a lot better. And that's when I got my certificate.
How long did it take you to start feeling better? Because I know sometimes people are like, okay, I'm going to start doing this stuff, but it can maybe take a little bit longer than they recognize that it will.
Yeah. So it's really been, and sounds cheesy, but it is a journey, So it's like I would start to feel better pretty quickly with the food piece, because once you're feeding your body the food that it needs to thrive, you start to feel better. You balance your blood sugar, your energy goes up, calm your anxiety a little bit. But there were a lot of underlying things going on too. So that's where it was like, if a little bit of extra stress would hit, I felt like I would just take all of these steps back because my body was so in fight or flight still, So I would say, honestly, with a few changes, stress reduction and nutrition, I felt better quickly. But at the same time, I'm now 4.5, 5 years in. I'm still working on things to regulate my period, to regulate my body. And it's things that I work on every day because that we just have to understand our body and how our body works. And mine's very sensitive.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think, sometimes people can get discouraged if everything's like not perfect in 30 days or what have you, and the thing that I try and, tell clients a lot of times is like, okay, so we're taking care, initially of this sort of like the outside layer, right? Which is a big one. And you're going to feel a lot better just based on dealing with that. But then you uncover that layer and then there's another one underneath it, right? And you start to like really, it's like digging deep down into, working towards that root, and that does take time and connecting to your body.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And even now I'm working on my own gut stuff. I always start with the gut, but I'm going back to it because I've been dealing with pelvic pain again. And we talked about that a little bit on the podcast. But I know there's something going on underneath the surface. So it's like, although I feel a lot better, I mean, worlds of difference, I'm still digging down and figuring out what are these little bits and pieces that are missing.
Yeah. And it really is so much of a journey. And I think that, I can think back to, and I can really relate to the anxiety piece that you're talking about, because I didn't realize I had anxiety until I was in therapy in my 20s, and it took me probably 3 years to actually understand that it was, that these thoughts going on in my brain all the time weren't what everybody was experiencing. My therapist was like, finally, she gets it.
Exactly.
But really, I think sometimes people get scared when they hear like, oh, it's a journey and it's gonna like, there's gonna be these ups and downs, but really, it's so much more than just this sort of like, you're gonna feel better component, right? Like you are actually gonna get to know yourself in a way that you never would otherwise. Like, I think that's kind of the bigger purpose sometimes of this, is to connect us to our true and real selves. Like, because we finally have to put down what the world expects of us, right? Because our body's like, nope, you're not going to do it anymore.
If I wouldn't have gone through that, and I'll say this, I loved teaching. I had always been a musician my entire life. I always knew I wanted to either perform or be a teacher, but I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for that situation. Like I was living very much in just like what society wanted me to do. And I think that's a big other, when we get more into like the spiritual piece of things, when you're not living out your truth, you're not getting it. The universe will throw things at you and your body reacts. There's energetic misalignment going on. And so I would never have quit my job. I quit my job 4.5 years after that happened. I'm now working for myself. I work with my husband. We run a podcast production company. And so it's like all of these things happen for a reason. I would not have been this in tune with myself if it weren't have been for those like rock bottom moments in my life.
Absolutely. And that's the reality, right? Is that most of us do have to hit some kind of rock bottom in order
unfortunately.
To change. I know. Why is human nature like that? Like, why did things get set up that way?
We're stubborn. That's why we're stubborn.
Well, so I was going to like wait till later to ask you about the spiritual aspect, but since that's already come up, let's talk a little bit about that, because I think even in my work, I know how important it is, but I tend to like leave it towards the end. It's like, okay, let's talk about all of these like physical things that you can do first. But I really do think that the spiritual energetic component and that can mean different things to different people, but that's so
Exactly.
important with hormone work. So can you explain kind of, what that means to you and how you work with that with
Yeah.
clients?
Yeah. We're recording this on the full moon, by the way. Did you know that?
Ah, that's right.
Yeah, today's the full moon and I'm ovulating. I like weirdly,
Okay.
I know. And you don't have to be synced with the moon, but when you are, it feels really
It's
good.
amazing. Yeah.
I
It
know.
rarely happens to me, but it's pretty cool when it does.
Yeah, it is. So really for me, it's kind of like what you said. It can mean something different to every single person, but what it comes down to is, do you feel safe and do you feel grounded in your earth suit? Like being here on the earth, do you feel safe and protected and grounded? Because at the underlying problem is we don't. And so this is what's creating all this anxiety. And then it's really about like believing in something bigger than yourself. So whether that's like me saying I'm synced to the moon, that's pretty cool, and the moon affects the ocean. And think about the seasons. I mean, it snowed today in Ohio, the
Yeah.
first snow. And I was thinking to myself, winter can be a really hard time for people. It's a lot like your menstrual cycle and your period. Sometimes you need to go inward, you need to slow down. And like, there's so many different pieces and parts to the seasons and the way astrology works and our bodies and the female system. There has to be something bigger
Absolutely.
than us. And when I really got into that and started going inward, starting to meditate, doing yoga, those were kind of my gateways, I guess, into this world. I felt this sense of peace. And then I believe that sense of peace resonated within my body, and it does. It can heal because you are taking yourself out of that fight or flight that you're in so much of the time. But for other people, it could just be nature. It could be religion, if that's your thing. I also am really into tarot, and I'm excited to get my Reiki 2 certification this weekend. So I do believe that there's some sort of mystic something or other out there, and I just have fun kind of digging into it and using that to help my clients connect to their intuitive voice. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And I love that because I think, well, first, for people that aren't so much into that, I try and break it down in that scientific perspective that you just did. If nothing else, it takes you out of your fight or flight and into
Right.
the parasympathetic nervous system. So we know, scientifically that these things do that. So even if you're not like spiritual or,
Right.
into that, but also I find that most people, like, especially with tarot, they get super excited. Like, even
Yeah.
if you're not into that, they're like, yeah, pull a card.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do a tarot event every month here in Columbus. And the thing that I say is there's 2 ways to think about it. If you are woo woo, or whatever, and you believe in that, go for it. Believe that the cards are divinely guided for you and that you have spirits and angels and, there's energy coming to pull the cards. Or believe that when you pull a card, that's going to trigger something intuitively for you. It's going to spark an idea. It's going to make you think. And whatever it is that comes to your mind immediately, that is your intuitive voice speaking, and you need to listen to it. So it can go either way. You can choose to believe in it however you want, but there is science to it. And we can't deny, like, we have gut instinct, right? Everybody knows what that means. You have a gut instinct. I believe that is your soul voice speaking or your intuitive voice speaking, whatever you want to call it. We have to listen to it.
Yep. I tell people all the time, they're like, I believe our soul is in our stomach.
I think so.
It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, sacral chakra, like all
Yes.
of the feelings that we feel in our stomach, and this area that encompasses, and when I say stomach, I kind of mean like lower area, not your actual like stomach up high,
Yeah.
so like our reproductive organs, like all of that is in that area, and that's like our area of power as women, right? That has been shut down to us for a while, and we're just kind of rediscovering now.
Yeah. So getting my Reiki 2 this weekend, like I mentioned, super pumped because I feel like the next piece to bring into the program I'm working in is working with the sacral chakra. Because you're right. How many years have women just shut down that energy center?
Yep.
And that's our root of feeling sexual and empowered and confident and rooted. It's not your root chakra, but there's rooting there. And so I'm like, there is a big correlation between menstrual pain and gut issues and all, PMS in general and the sacral chakra and unaligned energy.
Yep. It's
So,
all in there right there.
yeah.
So I love that you're focusing on that. And just like one other thing I want to add to it, like for me, I mean, I was raised Catholic, and then I was
Same.
I'm sure you had that period of your life where you're like, to religion, you know.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to kind of come back to this idea of spirituality in my life and like kind of create it for myself after, you know, sort of getting away from the dogma of a particular religion. And so that was really hard. But in the healing journey, it has helped me so much to have that grounding to come back to, because you are going to hit walls, right?
Yes.
You are going to hit moments where you're like, why am I not better? I mean, everybody hits that, you know, like even though you are better, sometimes it feels like you aren't to where you feel like you should be. And having something to come back to believe that you are doing what needs to be done and that you are essentially taken care of in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I grew up Catholic too, so I know exactly what you mean. I'm 100% Italian, so I went through the whole thing, confirmation, all of that stuff.
Wow.
But yeah, I went through that period with it as well. And so I remember even thinking when it comes to tarot and some of the things I was doing, I had this like weird belief, or it was like ingrained in me, like, oh, is that bad? You
Yeah.
know, can
Yep,
I do
absolutely.
that? And it wasn't until I realized every single, whether it's a religion or a spiritual belief, they all are coming down to the same root. So whether there's rules tied to it or not, whatever you resonate with, that's what it comes back to. Like I still, if I walk into a beautiful Catholic church, I can get something from that. I was in Singapore and I went to a Buddhist temple and a Hindu temple, and I was just in awe of just the beauty and the spirituality. And I'm like, we're all coming down to the same thing here, aren't we? Like we're trying to grasp this concept of there's something beautiful and spectacular out there.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter what it is or which
exactly.
way you're getting to it.
Exactly. Well, so that makes me think a little bit too about, you know, as you kind of figure out your way in the spiritual, energetic world, what have you, and, you know, you don't have to like jump full force into that. We're not saying that to everybody, but just kind of start to find your way in. I'm really curious, you know, especially going back to the full moon and thinking about your cycle. So how does this all work in terms of starting to really like follow your cycle and track? And you know, I know probably most people understand that are listening to this, but if you don't, you know that we have these 4 phases to our cycle, and kind of understanding that and working with that can help us in our own lives. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, for example, I just talked about how it's winter here, and I've really been reminding myself, how do I treat myself when I'm on my period?
Mm,
And how can I take that same belief that I so strongly believe that we need to alter the way we live our lives a little bit according to our cycle? You can't do it all the time, but in the wintertime, it's time to go inward. It's time to slow down. It's okay that the days are a little bit darker. It's okay that you want a little bit more heavy and comforting foods. And that's the same thing for your period. So when you're on your period, you might be craving more broths and more soups, and you want to slow down and you don't want to go out and have that dinner date because it's time for you to be by yourself, and maybe you want to journal and have a heating pad on your stomach, you know? And so I think it's important that we honor that part of our life and the seasons of our cycle, because if we don't, we're really going to be working against ourselves and what's happening in the body. Like for
mm,
example, when you come out of your menstrual phase, you head into the follicular phase. That's like spring. It's like
mhm.
the veil has been lifted, you know, and you're like feeling better. Your energy is starting to rise because your estrogen's getting ready to rise. And this is a time where you are going to want to maybe go be a little bit more social, especially heading up to ovulation, right? Because your estrogen is going to be at its highest, its peak there. And so it's like you're ready to socialize, you're ready to do things. Your body feels light and energetic, and you might want to eat more fresh vegetables and like sauteed and steamed foods. Um, but so like listening to that is what's going to help you really get through each phase of your cycle and not work against yourself, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. And then,
Absolutely.
of course, luteal phase, you're heading into your period. So it's a time to slow down again and go inward and not judge yourself for feeling like it's, you know, you're heading into this more quiet time of your life.
Mhm. And I think that this is such an important thing to talk about with women, because we have all been brought up in a society that is the more masculine go 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 all the time, right? And we've crafted our lives to fit into that model, because we haven't really necessarily had a choice. but
Exactly.
but also I think we just haven't known anything. We've been so disconnected from our cycle, from our period, from all of that, and just kind of hating that even happens, that we've really missed out on the power of following that. And what I like to tell clients that I work with is that I think we live in a time where we're recreating the paradigm, right? We're hopefully creating a new one that allows us to work with this feminine cycle more, and that like we essentially, our daughters may not have to worry about as many different illnesses and anxiety and hitting the point that it's hard to come back from, because of simply following the cycle.
Yeah. I think we're making a change with that. And it makes sense because we have worked so hard to say like we're equal and we can do these things and we can live in a masculine driven world. Like we've wanted to do that for so long because we've wanted to have a voice and because we're amazing. And so we should be able to do that.
We can, yeah.
But I think we went a little bit too much in that direction. And now we're living so much in our masculine mode. And I mean, for example, like, when I read this, I don't remember where I read this, but when I learned that men, have a 24-hour cycle and that we do with our circadian rhythm, but as far as our menstrual cycle goes, it's like a 28-day cycle. And that the workday is based on the man's 24-hour cycle. Like you wake up, you feel, energized, you have your peak in the afternoon, and then you come home and you start to wind down. Like our body doesn't really do that. It does it in those week chunks. And so it started to click with me. Like, why are we forcing ourselves to live in this 9-to-5 world? Maybe we can at least make some modifications. Right. So maybe that's like scheduling your big client calls around ovulation time or when you're in your follicular phase, if you can. And maybe that means not doing anything crazy or like going to a networking event when you're heading in like end of your luteal phase into your menstrual cycle. Can we start to honor our body in that way? We can still live in this masculine driven world a little bit. I say we bring in the feminine, but yeah,
absolutely. How do you work with clients or people in your program that, they're like, well, I just have this 9-to-5, 9-to-6 job and I can't change that? What are some of the little things? Like, I know you just mentioned a couple of things, but like, if you feel like your time is set by someone else, what are things that you tell them to include in their day?
Well, first of all, I get it because I was a teacher. Yeah. So there was every period of the day, literally every hour was scheduled for me. I could not change anything about my day. So the first thing you can do, honestly, is how can you feed your body to at least support your hormones? Because if there's going to be factors, like even the littlest thing, like being in a building and not seeing enough light, that affects our hormones. So if there's like all of these other factors and you can't choose when to relax or when to not relax in your day, use food to support your hormones. So making sure, my biggest thing is just start your day with a quality breakfast that gives you enough protein and enough healthy fat to stabilize your blood sugar, to bring your body back into that parasympathetic state when other stuff is thrown your way throughout the day. Food is going to be your go-to. And then can you do some breathing in the middle of the day to start to anchor you and to ground you? Then it's the little things I mentioned. Like if you can start to pick and choose a little bit here and there, like what fits with your cycle during each week and work tasks, then do it. Like as a teacher, for example, I'm not going to create a whole new unit when I'm about to start my period. My body just doesn't want to do that, Maybe it's time for me to, or I can organize, maybe I'll organize things, but I'm probably not going to be super creative during that time. So you kind of plan around that way.
Yeah, that's really good, because I think that's a thing that a lot of women come up against, right? They're like, well, I can't change my schedule, so what can I do? And I'm so glad that you brought food up, because it always comes back to food, right? I mean, there's so many things that we need to do to connect to our bodies and to, try and balance them out. But like food has to be the thing that underlies all of it.
And sleep. We have some two basics. We can just go right to the basics. Two things that can help.
Sleep, hydrate.
Exactly. Eat, sleep, drink. As I'm drinking green tea right now. Eat, sleep, water.
Yeah. Well, another thing I'm curious about, because, it's something that I see so much, and you mentioned it earlier, in my practice, is just dealing with gut issues. And, I think a lot of times that can get overwhelming for people too, because they're like, well, I don't know. A lot of times people don't even really realize that they have gut issues until, they talk to somebody like you or I, and they're like, oh, okay. So what are some of the things that you do, to help people around that, or recommend to do around that?
I do think that the gut can seem overwhelming at first, but there's really like these key steps that we can take. And it's just about breaking it down. First of all, I just want to say I was one of those people that I was like, I don't think I have any gut issues, but I did. So if you're struggling with any sort of hormone imbalance or, PMS around your period or anything like that, you probably have, I would say most likely have something going on with the gut because you need to detox those hormones. So, but the first thing is like, what can you start to crowd out that's going to help and ease inflammation and start to heal the gut? So I have a 14-day gut reboot, and I just start with that. Like, let's start by crowding out things. I'm not going to say you have to remove black and white. Eventually, there are things you probably will want to remove, but it's about taking things out and what can you bring in that's going to be healing to the gut. So, of course, there's the typical like dairy, gluten, sugar, inflammatory oils. We want to start to crowd those out. But then what can we bring in? Well, we can bring in some healing bone broth, or we can bring in extra leafy greens to support our digestion. And so start with that. Then we can go down the route of, okay, well, maybe we want to look into an antimicrobial supplement or something to help to remove anything that's going on. And then you start there and see how you're doing. And then it's kind of like symptoms. Are we feeling constipated? Are we feeling gassy? Are we the opposite? And like, what can we do to start to address your individual story? And then healing the gut afterwards with, again, food, nutrition, supplements. There's a lot of things that you can do, but it's all in baby steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I kind of constantly have to remind myself too, because I think a lot of times we want to, like, when we're motivated, we're like, let's do this. And the reality is that doesn't really set us up for long-term success. And really, yeah, looking at the adding in more, instead of like, okay, I have to cut all these things out, because that mental shift is huge too, right? Because it can feel really depressing otherwise.
I started that way. I was like, I'm just going to cut everything out. And I get like that. When I get frustrated, I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm cutting everything. And it can work for a while, but then you're in diet mentality.
Yeah.
And that is something that I am absolutely against. I'm against black and white thinking. I'm against diet culture. And so I really try and make sure I've created this gray area of how can we heal the body but not go into restriction mode, because once you do that and you say I can't have this, or this food is bad, or this food is good, what does your brain do? Well, it wants to gravitate towards that. And then that's an unhealthy cycle, not only for your mental health but also for your physical health.
Yeah.
And I like to make a point too that all this work that I do, it's never about the calories in and the calories out for me, and it's never about the scale. It's about how you feel and what's going on with the body.
That is so important, like
Yeah.
always bringing it back to that, because obviously we live in a culture that is so focused on the other.
Yes.
And all of the things that can come from that, versus like, yeah, I want to know, how do you feel? How does it feel when you eat this versus eating that? What is your energy like? I mean, I think energy is such a big thing to just come back to, just simply, it's like, when do you feel more energetic?
Yeah. Well, and the world has taught us to feel like, they're like, you need to eat this to feel a certain way, or you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to heal the body. It's like, we're all different, and we all have a different story. Our lifestyles are all different. So if somebody tells you that, it's like, turn the other way.
Well, I have the perfect anecdote for that. So I just did the MRT food sensitivities test, which I've actually been doing with clients for a little while, but I hadn't done on myself yet, along with the GI map. And my biggest sensitivity is to coconut, which is, I know, it's actually much harder than you would think, because I have learned that coconut is in everything. Like, you don't even think about it, because it's lots of ingredients are derived from it, so it won't even necessarily say that. But like, coconut is touted as this like such a health food, right? In the like nutritional world these days, and like, oh, it's the MCTs and all this is good, and it's like, but it's not for me,
Yeah, right.
So it's like that just points to the bio-individuality that we each have, and kind of, understanding. And the truth is, like, I've kind of thought for a little while that I've had a coconut thing, but then I could talk myself out of it because I'm like, no, it's such a health food,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody's body is different and everybody's gut bacteria is different. I just took a test. I'm waiting for it to come back. It's called Viome,
Oh, yes.
Viome.
I have a friend that did it, but I haven't seen her result.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm very curious. I met Naveen, who's the co-founder of it, when I was at this summit. He actually is going to be on my podcast soon.
Cool.
I recorded with him already, so it's going to be awesome.
Nice.
But yeah, listen in. But I'm waiting for the results to come back, and I'm just curious because it, like, I think specifically says kind of what bacteria is going on and what that bacteria is able to digest, and that's different for everybody. So, for example, like, I know cruciferous vegetables and me don't really get along very well. I wish I'm working on it, but I'm curious to see if like that comes back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I do think that this is the kind of whatever wave of the future, if you want to call it, is doing these kind of individual tests that really tells you what's going on in your gut.
Yeah.
Because as you said, each of us have our own microbiome happening, and it's kind of hard to tell sometimes, and right now, I know for some people it can be a little cost prohibitive, which is tough. And at the same time, I also think, people can often choose to say, okay, this is important to me right now. I am going to test this, versus maybe not like go to a couple concerts that month or something like that, so.
You pick and choose what's important for you. And again, that also goes in steps. So when it comes to testing, like you want to start with the gut test so that you can know exactly what's going on there. And then maybe take the Dutch test or something later on, because you don't want to take it and be like, all this stuff's wrong. And then you have to go back and fix it and then go take it again. So everything comes in steps. And you're right. You will hit a point where you're like, I need to know. I'm ready to know.
Yeah. It becomes abundantly clear. That's for sure.
I'm with you 100%.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, kind of going back, is, in your journey of kind of like healing and figuring things out on your own, did you also work with other practitioners? And, what was that like in terms of needing to advocate for yourself? Was that an issue?
The biggest issue for me was not getting the answers I wanted in Western medicine. And so that was really hard because I felt like every time I would go to the doctors, I would have all this information from my studies or whatever I was doing in the books I was reading. And I always felt like I was not smart enough or that I was just Googling. I actually had a doctor tell me that once. She was like, stop. I was like, what?
Google is their nemesis, right? They just think, oh, it's some random thing on the internet that they, somebody read. And I'm like, it's on PubMed. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Like, I've taken courses on this. Like, I'm not just Googling. So that was really hard. So yeah, the first thing I did, I worked with a nutritional therapist for a little bit. And then recently, like right now, I'm working with a hormone coach and I just schedule with her and she's supporting me through this gut stuff that I'm working on right now. And it's like, you can know all the information. Let me tell you, you can read the books, you can have the certifications, but I think the powerful thing, I'm sure you can attest to with having a coach, is that they're going to help hold you accountable. And plus you can bounce ideas off of them and you can share. A lot of it is also that emotional piece of like, here's what's going on with me. And you hear me? Oh my gosh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've worked with a coach myself. And then of course I got a certificate and all of this so that I could really know what I was doing too. Yeah. So I think you just get really into it and get into the self-help phase as well.
Yeah.
But coaches are everything.
I'm glad that you brought up that, as coaches, that we need coaches too, because for all the reasons that you said, but also, a lot of times, like, I think because we know so much, it's really hard to kind of like hone in for ourselves, right? It's like, well, I could do this, all these things, versus another person's going to be like, okay, let's bring it down.
Yeah.
Specific things that I see happening, because they're not emotionally invested in the same way. Of course, they want you to heal, but it's just different for ourselves because we're in it, right? And so it can get really hard to be clear-headed sort of around decisions. So just for any of you, coaches or practitioners out there that are listening or watching, like, I really highly recommend doing that through out your life. It just, it's a huge part of the healing.
I think you can go so many different ways. You know, when you know a lot, you're like, okay, it could be this, it could be that. Should I try that? Oh, this is a supplement that works. And then I'll need to pair it with this. And then, and then you just go round and round in your head. Just have somebody break it down for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So one other thing I was curious about in terms of, we know that stress is so impactful to our periods and our cycles, and that a lot of us aren't necessarily doing enough, self-care stuff. So in terms of like looking at it from the four cycles or the four phases of our cycle, what are some of the things that, a woman could do in each phase that would really support that phase?
I always go back to how we work out because I think that's huge. And I see so many women, because of course, when you're struggling with hormone imbalance, weight can be an issue when we get, so what do we want to do? It's like we restrict our calories and we overexercise. And that is not always great for your body because that adds more stress to the body. And so, for example, in the follicular phase, when your estrogen is rising, it might feel better to go to that spin class or to go do like a dance workout. You might feel like you're ready to run, like when you're gearing up for ovulation. Like your body responds well to that because your hormones are supporting those types of higher intensity exercises, like a HIIT workout, for example. But as we head into the luteal phase, especially like the second half of your luteal phase when progesterone is really rising, your body doesn't want to do that. And so if you're forcing yourself to like burn those calories and go to that workout and your body doesn't want to, it's really your body's going to go into stress mode and going to have the opposite effect. So yoga, walks, Pilates, strength training during that phase of the cycle is really helpful. And then when it comes to self-care, like for me, I noticed that I want to sit down. Like today, I really was into meditating. I like meditated when I woke up. I feel like today's going to be a really good day for me to want to pop out my journal. I think it's because of the full moon, because I'm definitely ovulating today. So it's like the opposite, but it's
and
like
the snow, right? Because we have some snow here in Nashville too. And I'm like, I don't want to do anything today.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not necessarily with the phase of my cycle, but if it is, so like the end of your luteal phase or period, it's like, okay, let's do those sort of self-care routines. Or maybe you want to take a nice magnesium salt bath during that time and that feels good. Mm-hmm. But at the beginning of your cycle, maybe it's something different. Like you want to do some dry brushing and like activate your body and stimulate the lymphatic system. So it really just depends. But again, if you're like me, right now I'm ovulating, but I'm feeling kind of wintry, honor that too. Yeah. Listen to what you intuitively want to do.
I think that's such a valid point right there. I'm glad that you made it because, we don't want to take old dogma and replace it with different dogma. Like you have to follow
exactly
the phases of your cycle in this exact way. It's like, no, connect to how you're feeling in that moment. And there's a lot of different, aspects that are going to impact that. Like this month, it was crazy. I had so much energy the first day of my period, which never happens. But, I was like, I feel like working out and that was fine, but it's like, if I was feeling just like, ugh, and then I'm like, I really need to work out, that's going against how my body feels, so it's
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it comes to like food cycling or seed cycling as well. You don't have to be super strict on it. Mm-hmm. Like I have a food syncing document that I always work on with my clients and I use it myself, but sometimes I'm like, I don't want any of that. Like I'm not craving that. I might be craving red meat, for example, and a phase that might not be serving my body as much, but if I'm craving it, I'm craving it for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. So that actually brings up a question for me. So do you feel like nut butters are okay? Like in terms of sesame, as part of the seed cycling, do you think it's okay to use nut butter or do you really straight up need the nuts?
So honestly, I have never full on done seed cycling. Okay. Like I've incorporated it a little bit like here and there. Like, okay, flax and pumpkin, I'll incorporate that a little bit. And then, sesame seeds but I've never looked into it enough to say, is there a difference between the actual seed and doing the nut butter?
Yeah, it's funny because I
don't have an answer.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I'm like, oh, it's fine to do that. And then I was like, I mean, I'm assuming it is because it's the actual, same food or whatever. But
I wonder if there's anything to like the nutrients being processed Better?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah. I'll have to kind of dive into that a little bit more. But yeah,
Because you know how they say flax seeds whole, you don't absorb, but if you do flax meal, you do. So I don't know.
I know. That's why, well, I think part of it is I think about like when I had an ostomy and you have to just eat foods that are more broken down to be
Yeah.
able to absorb everything better, so, and you don't want to like irritate your gut at all. And so nut butters were always a better choice than
It's
that.
more soothing. Yeah, your body doesn't have to break it down as much as like chewing and the shells around the nuts and all that. So
Exactly.
yeah,
So,
I don't know.
oh my God, I could go on with you forever, but I want to make sure everybody knows how to contact you and if they want to work with you. So tell them all the info.
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm really active over on Instagram at Nourished with Nina. My website is nourishedwithnina.com. And if you are interested in the 14-day reboot or any of the coaching I have, you can find the information on my website there. And then, of course, Healing Hormones podcast. Your episode just aired this past Monday. So
Yes.
I don't know when this comes out, but head on over if you want to hear us talk. It was a really powerful episode.
It was so much fun, and I've loved having you on again today, and I would definitely want to have you, on again in the future. Do you have any like big things happening in 2020 that you want to let us know about?
Right now, I'm working on a group coaching program. I'm so excited about it. It's going to be very, very tailored to like the steps for hormone balance and what you can do to support the body. So I'm excited to be working on that, creating all my documents. So that'll be launching early 2020. I'm hoping in January.
Yay! I know. It's always the hope, right? Because you're like,
yeah,
I'm creating, and then I have all these other things happening at the same time.
it's a lot of work, but I'm also inspired by it. I'm using it with my one-on-one clients too. So as I go, I'm using it now. And so it's going to be great. It's going to be a good program.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here today with me, chatting. It was so good to see you again and talk to you again.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun.
All right, guys, check out Nina's website, her Instagram. Definitely, I love her Instagram, so go check that out. And I will see you soon. Bye.